お前はもう死んでいる。
Yo, what is up, my Nakama? So my name is Daniel, and I'm a first-year medical student, and I just finished anatomy. I'm super excited. It was pretty tough at some points. I definitely learned how to study, and I learned how to really manage my time because it's a lot different than undergrad. There's way more content and way more material to cover at such a fast rate, but I think I kind of got the hang of it now, and it's good. I ended on a good note. I passed anatomy, so that's always good. So I wanted to share with you guys some really important tools and some study strategies that I learned while taking anatomy in medical school that can hopefully help you in your own studies. So the first thing I would say is that you definitely need to manage your time, as I mentioned earlier. And by this, I mean that it's better to study a little bit every single day rather than leaving everything to the end. And I know you've probably heard of this a lot, but in medical school, you will fail if you do that. If you leave all of the content for the last 2 or 3 days before the exam, there is no way in hell you're gonna memorize all of that material. So I kind of learned that the hard way after my second exam because I was pretty close to failing, but luckily I just barely passed. But after that exam, I learned that it's better to study a little bit every single day and really try and master the material that you just learned in lecture right after lecture. And the way I do this is I do something called Anki, which uses spaced repetition. It's kind of like an online flashcard software. And basically what I do with Anki is right after I listen to a lecture, I will make my Anki cards, or if someone else made them, I'll use those cards. And I'll immediately do those flashcards associated with the lecture. And that way I feel like I really retain the information, and also I'm doing my studying in that way too. So I kind of review the material I learn every single day. And that's really helped me. And I've noticed that when I started doing that after my second anatomy exam, I scored way higher on my third and fourth exams, which allowed me to pass anatomy in medical school. Now, the second thing I would recommend for you to do in anatomy in medical school is to really go into the cadaver lab. So there is no better resource than an actual human body to know where structures are and how they course through the human body. And the people who donated their bodies for us, for our medical use, it is just one of the most selfless things they could possibly do. So, it's really just an invaluable opportunity, and you have to take advantage of every moment you get with the cadaver. So I would definitely recommend going in as often as you can into the cadaver lab, because that is what really helped me understand anatomy. Because sometimes, when I was taking a test, I would remember during my dissections, where a certain artery was coursing, whether something was anterior or posterior, and I would just remember doing that dissection, and I could easily answer that question on the test. So definitely going into anatomy lab is a huge help. Now, the third tool that kind of helped me is actually an app. And I bought it on the iPad. It's a little bit expensive. It's $25, I believe. But the app is called Atlas 2020. And I'm gonna show it to you here. But basically what this app allows you to do is you essentially have a digital cadaver right in front of you with all of the organ systems, all of the bones, muscles, and tissues. And this is just an insanely awesome tool. There's even, so here, let me show you, for example, if you wanted to review the pulmonary system, here we go. You can, have a sort of three-dimensional view of the pulmonary system. And, when I was kind of really unsure of where something was or what artery was where, I would just pull this app up and, you can zoom in and, for example, you can see, here is the superior vena cava, here is the aorta. So these things were very good. Here are the lungs covering the heart. Now, one of the cool things you can do with this app is you can actually simulate cadaver lab here. So if I can just get this right, if you, for example, you're doing head and neck right now, I just clicked head and neck, you can actually, zoom in and sort of practice your dissection. So, for example, let's say we dissect away the sternocleidomastoid, the platysma, then, we reveal the muscles underneath. And another really neat thing about this is you can actually go into augmented reality and you can click a surface. Oh, And there it is in real life. Yeah, this is probably a little unnecessary, but you know, sometimes it's kind of fun to play around with this. But yeah, so that is Human Atlas 2020. It's definitely probably one of the most expensive apps I've bought, being $25, but it was really useful during anatomy, and I'm sure, you know, if I'll ever need to reference back to any structures or anything, it's definitely really good to use. Now, that book that you saw in the intro, that was my fiance's dad's book from when he went to medical school. And you know, if you have this app and all the online resources, I don't think it's really necessary to buy a book. And most of the time you can find online PDF copies of anatomy textbooks anyways, so I wouldn't really go out of my way to buy textbooks. And in fact, I haven't bought a single textbook yet in medical school, and I've still gotten by. So yeah, you probably don't really need textbooks anymore. There's enough resources out there for you to study and learn the material. And so one last thing that kind of helps me with anatomy is to study relationships of different muscles and arteries and veins. And what I mean by this is, you know, if there's a lot of muscles, for example, that are located in the forearm, and if you're just trying to rote memorize all those muscles, you might find it really difficult to understand where they're located and where they attach to. So it's better to kind of chunk things and to group things into different compartments. So for example, there's like a superior compartment, there's an intermediate compartment, and a deep compartment to your forearm muscles. So if you kind of group those muscles in those individual compartments, then I've noticed it becomes a lot easier to memorize that information rather than just straight up memorizing 10 different muscles and hoping that you know exactly where they're located. So definitely know, you know, relationships with different muscle groups, and also how things course through the body, you know, whether they're going anterior or posterior to certain bony landmarks or certain vessels. Because this really helps, you know, especially with test questions that ask you, you know, if something is compressed or if you have some sort of atrophy in a certain area, you know, what type of vessel or what sort of muscle might you be affecting. And if you know those relationships, then you can easily answer those questions. But yeah, you know, I'm super happy that I passed anatomy. You know, this was the kind of first leg of my medical school journey. And it was definitely an eye-opener into how I should study and how much information there is to know, because the human body is really just insanely complex as we learn more about it. But I'm excited for my next block, which is called MAD, which stands for Metabolism and Defense, I believe. So we're going to be going over biochem, the entirety of the human biochem in 10 days. So, well, that's probably going to be fun. And then afterwards is defense. So I'm assuming that has stuff to do with like immunology and whatnot. But yeah, you know, I'm excited for the rest of my journey, and I hope you follow along. And as always, Dattebayo.